Greetings and welcome back. Becoming UnDone is a podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. Join me, Toby Brooks, as I invite a new guest each week where we can examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. Today's guest knows what it means to chase a dream, to live it, and then face the question of what comes next. I first met Idris Haroon when he was a standout defensive lineman at the University of Arizona, and I was a lowly graduate assistant athletic trainer. But Idris has carved out a name for himself, not only on the football field, but as an entrepreneur. But like so many high performers, his journey didn't stop at the final whistle. Today, he owns and operates a business. He's a husband. He's a dad. He's redefining what strength looks like on the field and navigating everything off of it. So without further ado, Idris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Toby. This is a great platform. This is a story that needs to be told, and there's something heroic about it.
What?
Everybody needs a hero, especially in today's climate. And I think you're providing a platform for athletes to really tell their story, but give hope to a lot of
Yeah.
ex-athletes out there that are going through this tough transition.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. You're looking sharp in your U of A gear. So that's where our paths first crossed. Let's take it way back even before then, though. What did you want to be growing up and why?
Yeah, I grew up in the inner cities of Houston, Texas. Fortunate to have a beautiful mother and father in my life throughout my whole life, and a big family, siblings, two older brothers, younger sister, all in a small space, all in a small little space in Houston. And we didn't have much, but we had each other. We had discipline from the pops and loves from the moms, a good balance. And so, it was really the sky's the limit. Our parents told us we could be whatever we wanted to be. And, to be quite honest, with limited resources and a lot of siblings, there was a lot of anger issues that I had growing up, fighting with my siblings and mad because of the conditions that we had. And I was just a mad kid, angry. And until I found football was my cure. Football was my savior, and it just gave me an outlet, a place to release a lot of the aggression. And so once I put the helmet on at, you know, 10 years old, it was hard to take it off. And
Yeah.
and so, I just did it as something to do, as to keep me busy and to stay out of trouble. But when I started getting those letters from schools, my sophomore, junior year in high school, I was like, oh, I could probably go to college and get an education with this. And so focusing more on that in high school, and then, people telling me how good I was. And the NFL is I'm destined to be in the professional, right? I'm destined,
Yeah.
from a young age, people tell you you're going to the NFL, you're going to the NFL. So of course it's like for young kids, it's like I'm going to be an NFL player.
Right.
And that's just what I told myself. I'm going to be an NFL player, and all the way up until high school and through college until I wasn't an NFL player.
Yeah. I think that's such an interesting perspective because that drive to be at the highest level would take you further than if you just, "Oh, I want to be a standout on my high school team." But the darker side of that is if you don't achieve that, no matter how far it takes you, it can still feel like failure. And so we'll dig into that a little bit later. But first of all, in my introduction, I didn't include all of your flowers, so to speak. I mean, you were there for the best season in school history in 1998. You were also there for Coach Tomey's final season and kind of his unceremonious let go. And that season was just so close to being a great season, but it ended up being a disappointment. So when you first showed up in Tucson, I spent a lot of time on this show kind of dissecting Dick Tomey and what he means to people and how he connected people from all different cultures. We got this little fiery white guy from rural Indiana, and he's bringing together Polynesians and a guy from inner city Houston and Clay Hart from Tucson. I mean, people from all different walks of life, and they are a brotherhood. They are connected in a way that I don't think we see anymore in this day and age. But 18-year-old Dries showing up in Tucson, what was the aesthetic? What were you listening to? What would your teammates and friends say about young you on campus at U of A?
I was very young, and I was there was a what's interesting is I didn't know that Arizona was ranked 10th in the country in Playboy as one of the top party schools, right? So I came from a very religious household. I was raised Muslim in a Muslim household, very strict. And so going from a very strict Muslim household to the 10th ranked party school in the country it was awesome, right? So being being 18, everything was so new, everything was so green to me. Um, the landscape, right? The mountains and the heat, and it's just the palm trees, and it was just all of it was different. I had a chance to stay home. I was recruited by Texas A&M. I was recruited by Kansas State University. I took trips there, but there was just something about Tucson that attracted me. And I'm a Southern boy. I like the heat, so the heat was where it was, and 12 months out of the year, walking around in shorts and flip flops. But it was Tomey. It was Tomey. Like it was. The recruiter for Texas A&M walked into my house. The recruiter from Kansas State walked into my house. But when Coach Tomey walked into my house, it was different. And it was different because Coach Tomey knew how to relate to those kids who had dads, right? I had a fan. He was walking in houses of single parent moms, right? So he knew he was walking in, all kinds of houses, a lot of Polynesians on our team. He was walking into a lot of households. So he knew how to deliver the message to the dads, right? Moms, the message to the moms, they just want to know that their boy's taken care of, right? Fed,
Mm.
can they clean their clothes? Are they eating, right? But dads, right? He knew how to touch the dads. And he did. He sat down with my dad. He took his shoes off. He sat in the living room. He explained to my dad the benefits of Arizona, but the culture and the brotherhood and all the things that dads want to hear, right?
Yeah.
And then he got all to the bells and whistles and all that, all the perks, all that. He didn't spend a lot of time on that. He talked about the brotherhood. He talked about the coaching staff, the family oriented atmosphere. And that was it. That was it. And for me, family was the biggest value. I grew up in a big family in a small space. So family was everything for me. And so to answer your question, arriving in Tucson and being in that room with 120 guys, and everybody was just coming out of the same type of environment, right? Inner city kids, Polynesian kids, 3-star, 4-star scrappy kids. We didn't really have a lot of 5-star kids, right? There wasn't egos. We didn't have, Coach Tomey didn't, if you had an ego, you're not coming to Arizona. If you're a flashy guy, yeah, we had LA guys were flashy. We had, I'm not going to name their names, but we had some LA guys that were like, wow,
They know who they are. Yes.
they
Right.
know who
Right.
they
Right.
are. You probably had them on the show, but no egos, right? And so just that day we reported. I remember my parents. We packed up our little Toyota Camry. We drove to Tucson, and I just remember being dropped off at the hotel, like right off of on the corner there off of Campbell, and we all just
Yeah.
reported there. And then from there we went to Camp Cochise, and we spent 3 weeks in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And like, what the hell are we doing here? It was like Mars.
100%. Absolutely.
But it was, I was just very open, very green. And, and then the competition, right? Like these guys were big and
Yeah.
fast and they
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
hit. And so it was a learning experience really quick.
Right. Well, it was definitely a different era in college football, and you show up on campus and you're there for the duration. You're going to grow and you're going to enter as a Wildcat and hopefully end as a Wildcat. And Coach Tomey's famous for a lot of Tomeyisms, but one is the team, the team, the team. And so for a young kid coming out of Houston from modest means who has dreams of playing in the NFL, the team, the team, the team may be a little bit different. And he was able to kind of take those personal aspirations and mold them into team goals. You were there to witness the high and the low, really, of his career and the release. And after that 2000 season, you get an opportunity to play professionally. What did that, seeing him navigate those highs and lows and those extremes and the energy he brought to practice, and what did that teach you as a man that you've seen kind of carry over into even your work today?
So I have a lot of stories, Coach Tomey stories, but one of my favorite is when I was freshman, sophomore year. So your point of the team, the team, the team. This is when I learned that lesson. So my freshman year, I think it was my freshman year, and I started skipping classes. And so I thought, hey, yeah, skip class, go hang out, go do something else. No big deal. But it was a big deal. And it was so much a big deal that I show up to practice one day and we line up for our normal warm-ups, and there's 120 guys out there. And Coach Tomey gets up and he says, hey guys, before we start warm-ups today, I need to point something out to you guys. Idris Haroon, come up to the front.
Oh no.
I'm looking around like, oh man, did I win something? You know, or to get called out, I'm about to win an award. I get up in front and he's like, Idris Haroon thinks it's cute to skip class. So what we're gonna do is, and they brought out a chair and put it right in front of me. Idris is gonna sit in this chair and watch 119 of you guys pay for him skipping class.
Oh no.
And the next thing I know, I'm looking around and everybody's looking at me. And then there's these things called up downs, right? And so you're jogging in place and then the coach blows the whistle and he says, hit. And you hit the ground and do basically you're doing like a burpee or something. You're hitting the ground and popping back up. Hit, up and down, up and down. And it's the worst. And after about 50 or 60 of those, you're gone, you're done. And coach is going and going, and I'm trying to do them with the guys to show them like, oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't mean to put you in this situation. Coach Tomey gets me, puts me right back into the chair. He says, no, you're gonna watch. You're gonna watch this. And so 119 guys paying the price of me skipping class was the first lesson about being a man that he taught me. He taught me many lessons, but the first lesson. And then after that, it was a one. And then afterwards, he got up, he hugged me, and he was like, "We're one fail, all fail, Dries. One fail, all fail mentality. This is how we're going to operate. One fail, all fail." And I never forgot that. Yeah, I skipped a couple classes here and there. I got, I learned the system. I figured it out. But that was the first lesson that Coach Tomey really taught me about life. Because when he coached us, yeah, to perform on the field, but he was preparing us for life.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about him.
It's tremendous. That's a powerful lesson. And one, especially that young in your career, to see seniors and fifth year guys have to pay the price for you certainly left a mark. So that 2000 season ends, unceremonious defeat. Were we on the road at ASU? I think
It
that
was a home game. I
That was a
remember
home
it.
game. Yeah, we 2 years in a row we lost to ASU. But either way, your career at Arizona is done. What's your mentality like? Not necessarily in that locker room, but you're still firmly committed to this goal of playing professional football. Talk me through what the closure of your college career was like and where you were at mentally.
It was tough, right? Because there were highs and lows. We played in a very unique defense. It was an Eagle flex defense. We had, you see a lot of it in college and in the NFL now, where these guys are kind of jumping in the gaps and coming up on the linebackers or in the gaps, in between the center and the guards, and then they're moving. Michael Parsons, they're moving back and forth. Like, we were doing that in the 90s. And the scheme we were in, Teddy Bruschi, when I was getting recruited, they showed me highlight tape to Teddy Bruschi. Everybody knows Teddy Bruschi. So when Coach Tomey was like getting to the football portion of it, he was like, hey, you could be like this guy. This is the guy you're replacing. You're coming to Arizona to replace this guy. And so I was like, this guy is getting 22 sacks a year. Like, this guy's an All-American, yeah, I want to do that. And so when we got to the Arizona, our scheme was a little different, and it really was built for our linebackers, right? And that was the humbling part, is when I got to, when Kansas State and Texas A&M were recruiting me, they're like, you're going to be the guy. When we got to Arizona, they were like, no, Lance Briggs, he's going to be the guy. Marcus Bell, Deshaun Polk, Antonio Pierce. Everybody knows Antonio Pierce. We were linebacker U. Like, our linebackers went to the NFL. Teddy Bruschi was different. We had defensive linemen that went to the NFL, but primarily it was our linebackers were supposed to go to the NFL, and they let it be known. And so with our scheme, it was very unique. And so we had a lot of success in our even though we had losing seasons, the defense was always top 10. We were always top 10. Even in our last year that you're speaking about, we were top 10 defense. And so we got a lot of recognition for that. My roommate in college, Joe Tafoya, which made my college experience even better, because he was on one end, I was on the other, right? He had the wide side, I had the short side. We used to flip-flop. He was my roommate. He was my best friend. And we competed against each other. We fought against each other. We would fight over cereal in the house. Like, we were just so competitive. And in the end, he got drafted to the NFL. And so, testament to just, the hard work and dedication that we put into it. But I was always a tweener, right? Like, I was always a guy I didn't really have the stats of a Joe Tafoya or a Teddy Bruschi. I had a solid year. I was all conference, but the NFL didn't really see where I fit in. And so I had a lot of interest from like Tampa Bay coming out my senior year. I had private workouts with them. They were the team that was most interested, the Cardinals. But in the end, draft day came and it went, and, nobody was calling over a free agent contract. So the first call was the Canadian Football League. And it was thanks to our defensive line coach, Coach Long, who had connections up there. And it was the Hamilton Tiger Cats that signed me to a free agent contract. And
Mhm.
so, as disappointing as it was for me, I looked at it as another opportunity to compete. And I took my talents up north. And for that first 6 months, I was destroying those guys. And then the snow came. But it was a transition where it allowed me to continue to play. It allowed me to chase down my goal, my dreams. I met a lot of guys on the same path as me. And, there were guys that I played with that ended up transitioning back to the NFL. So they had
Mhm.
great careers in Canada and transitioned back into the NFL. But for me, I did 2 years and then I was done. I dealt with injuries. I didn't understand the cold in Canada and I didn't know how to play in it. And so luckily for me, I want to even back up a little bit, Toby. I graduated, right? And that's
Mhm.
one of the things I brag about the most was I remember specifically being in the locker room with Antonio Pierce, Brandon Malamaniuna, Joe Tafoya, and there was someone else coming out that year. And we were trying to figure out, do we want to finish class or do we want to just go all in and pursue the NFL? It was a real discussion with us. And, Antonio Pierce and those guys, Brandon Malamaniuna, Joe Tafoya, they all went to the NFL, obviously, but some of us chose to stay in school and commit, and some of us chose to pursue the NFL, right? And so those that chose to pursue the NFL, obviously, they had great careers. But for me, I didn't have that. I didn't have that strong commitment from any NFL team, so I had to play it safe. So I had to finish school, and so I
Mhm.
was still carrying a full load. But I graduated, right? I walked across the stage with my degree. So when Canada was over for me, I didn't have to continue to chase Canadian football, arena football. I felt so bad for my guys that were chasing it, right? Because they didn't have their degrees. And so I
Mhm.
didn't have to chase arena football and all that. I was like, you know what? I have my degree. I'm going to enter the workforce.
Yeah. So many high achievers that I've had on this show have told me about their regret of not giving themselves even just a moment to kind of take it in. I mean, for you to pull that Tiger Cats jersey on for the first time and think, I'm a professional football player. Those dreams that young Idris had back in Houston had come true. Maybe not in the way you thought, maybe not in a Cowboys uniform, or I don't know who your team was back in the Oilers or
Oh yeah.
Texans or whatever. To take that in some ways is almost like it somehow dilutes or pollutes the striving to be your best. Like you're not going to rest on your laurels. Okay. So taking a moment to take it in that moment seems counterproductive, but being so consumed with that next level can kind of eat you alive. I did a little research before, less than 8% of high school players play collegiately at any level. That's not to say Pac 10 and D1, 8%. Less than 2% of them play professional football. So, by any metric, you are the best of the best. What was your mindset in Canada? Did you feel like you had achieved long held goals? Were you trying to get back and prove people wrong to make it into the NFL? Or where were you at psychologically with this? Some would say, like, I made it, but there was like an asterisk in my mind that I didn't quite make it.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. You want to be grateful. You do. You want to be grateful. But it was like, you knew this wasn't it. And it was a pass through. And so, lucky for me, I came from a pass rushing conference. And the Canadian Football League is pass rushing. It's 3 downs. First down, second down, punt. And so you're likely gonna pass on first down. You're likely gonna pass on second down. So it's you're doing a lot of pass rush. So for a defensive end, a pass rushing end, it was actually a great opportunity. And so immediately, and then, with our style of defense at Arizona and having Teddy Bruschi, we had martial arts instructors that were at our practice teaching us different hand placements and things. And so I brought that to Canada and they never saw that before. And so very quickly I separated myself during the preseason and then I made the team as a practice squad player. And then the first game, the starter got hurt and here I go. And then so as soon as I step in, Joe Munford was the top defensive end in Canada at the time. He's a Michael Parsons, right? Like he's a Michael Parsons of the Canadian Football League, and he happened to be on the opposite end of me. And so very different, right? He didn't care about me. He didn't show me nothing. He was like, it was very different from like Coach Tomey's experience. He was like, you stay over there, you get your own sacks. I'm not helping you. So, but I was competing really against him. I wasn't competing against any of the other defensive ends in the CFL. I had the best one on my team. And so that in my competitive nature, my performance, that when I stepped in as a starter, after my first game, I had 2 sacks against Toronto and then went over to Winnipeg, another sack, another tackle for loss. I was doing stuff that they never saw before. You know, these little Canadian running backs are running around and they got the ball hanging all out trying to be cute. And I just knocked the ball out, pick it up and take off running. Like, like it was just, to me, Canadian football, like I want to be respectful, but it's not American football. Right.
Right.
And so I went up there and I let them know, like, Canadians don't start playing until high school. Like I was playing since 4th grade. And so, Americans excel in the Canadian Football League because of that. We have an earlier start. And
Hmm.
so I had a lot of success. I had a lot of success. And then, the cold came and then the injuries came. I didn't know how to play with everything's turf in Canada. There's no natural field. So it was just the environment, my body. It was just a combination of things. I got hurt. And then eventually, they kept me around on the practice roster. But then they eventually signed some more guys. And then, they kind of weeded me out. And
Yeah.
so, it was psychologically having to move back home and live in your parents' house after having all of this success was
Yeah.
devastating, right? It
Right.
was it was my first. I'm 48 years old now. So from the time I left Canada to now, I've had devastating moments in my life. But I don't look at them as devastating, but blessings, because it was
Yeah.
always a transition period I was going through.
Yeah.
And because of what I experienced in the Coach Tomey era, allowed me to get through these devastating situations. But this was one. This was one where you're on such a high, and then you have to go home and live with your parents. And here we go. Like nobody's patting you on the back anymore.
Right.
Your dad's like, son, you can still play. Go out there and run some laps. And I'm like, Dad, I'm done. Right. But dealing with that transition was difficult. But luckily, I was able to start my career in the workforce and start transitioning into a whole new life.
Yeah. That's a great segue into where I want to go next. When I reached out to you, I said I was looking for an edge rusher with entrepreneurial skills. And you transition from the field to business. I think for a lot of folks, whether it's collegiately trying to make it into professional sports or for professional athletes trying to get one more contract or one more extension, it can be kind of a blurry end. You don't know for sure that I'm done. I'm officially done. They're always kind of holding out hope that there's another opportunity. For others, it's just a clear break. Like I'm done and I'm moving on to the next thing. You've transitioned from the field to business. You've earned your MBA along the way. You've started multiple businesses. So kind of talk me through what those years following pro football was like for you and how that experience up to that point helped prepare you for the journey ahead for what people would say on paper like how is playing professional football going to help you start a business, but in many ways there are some skills that definitely carry over. So talk me through that
Oh yeah.
transition for you.
Lots of transferable skills. Lots of transferable skills. And it's interesting because now I'm at a level where, I'm at an executive level in my real full-time job. I have a full-time job and I have a business. I know we'll get to that. But I'm at the executive level of my full-time job and I'm sitting in the room with other executive level folks who graduated from Harvard and Yale and Princeton and all these fancy schools, sat in front of the class, raised their hand a lot. But I wasn't that guy, right? Like I was the athlete, but I outperformed these guys. And I've always tell the people that I've managed over the years, I tell them all the time, it's not, book smarts will only get you so far. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm raising my kids the same way. Like book smarts will only get you so far. Like, yeah, we want A's and B's, but C's, that's okay, right? Like C's are okay. But at the end of the day, it's, common sense
Hmm.
that gets you to the executive level, to the C-suite level, right? It's discipline, it's grit, it's tenacity, and that never give up attitude. And I mean, all those things that we experience in college, all those things we experience in sports. I don't care if you're a swimmer or golfer. All of those highs and lows, waking up at 6 in the morning, the training, the effort, blood, sweat, and tears, all of that gets you to the C-suite. Not because you made A's and we're on honor roll. Yeah, that helps. That does. But Fortune 500 companies want leaders
Yeah.
and decision makers, right?
Mhm.
They don't care if you were on the C honor roll. If you were a leader and a decision maker, if you could lead people, leading people is the most unrecognized skill there is out there. And that's what
Mhm.
companies want. Can you lead people? And leading people comes from your coaches, right?
Yeah.
Like that comes from, your parents, if you have parents, but it comes from your coaches. The beauty of having coaches in your life. You see great examples of leaders at a young age. Our
Yeah.
coaches, they're yelling and screaming. Coach Tomey used to yell and scream, and he was a little guy. He used to grab me and shake me. And, he used to come up to this high, but he used to and yell and scream and throw things. But at the end of the day, he'll come and hug you, he'll sit down with you. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
we learn those things early on. And so when it's time to transition into the real world, you don't forget those things.
Yeah.
And so, I think for me, as I started transitioning into the workforce, I've always remembered that. And so, yeah, I had to start off with these little jobs and then eventually grew into these larger jobs. But I never forget that. Right? I always treated people with respect. All the things that Coach Tomey talked about, I always treated people with respect, giving respect, receiving respect, working hard in everything I do. First in the gym, last to leave, right? First in the office, last one to leave. I've always just tried to do the most, tried to show value from the very beginning, right? I just always, all these lessons, I just carried them through. And before I looked up, I was 20 years into corporate America. And I really
Mhm.
found a niche, right? I found a niche. There's, facility operations, workplace operations. Now it's called workplace experience, but managing the day-to-day operations of commercial buildings. That's the space that I've been in for the last 20 years. And I really scaled and excelled at that space. And so, and that's just because it's a people you're managing buildings and systems, which I'm good at, and you're managing people, which I'm good at. And so building effective teams, I've been able to do that. But, I think over the course of my career, what led to the entrepreneurship was over the course of my career, I noticed managing these commercial buildings, I noticed that there was really a gap missing, right? And so I'm managing these vendors. I'm managing the electrician, the plumber, the moving company. I'm managing all these different vendors and I'm paying out these invoices, hundreds of thousands of dollars of services. And I see the people doing the work. They look like me, they black and brown people are doing the work. But when I'm writing these $100,000 checks, they're going to white owned companies. And I've noticed that. And so I was like, this is interesting. I started paying close attention to it. And especially the moving component. Companies do a lot of moves. And our moving vendor was taking a lot of money from the company because we were doing a lot of relocations. And I learned the business. I learned the moving business. And
Mhm.
so at some point in my career, which was about 3 years ago, I think you're leading up to this,
Mhm.
is at 20 years into my career, I made a decision to take a leap and start my own commercial relocation company. And what a leap it was because, my wife loves me and she supports me, but she didn't support this idea, right? So I did it against my wife's wishes. I did it against my bosses and my mentors' wishes. Everybody told me not to do it. But what they didn't know, which Coach Tomey knew, is they don't know me, right? They don't know this.
Mhm.
They don't know the measure of the heart of the man, right? They didn't know. And so I took a chance and I jumped out there and risked everything and
Yeah.
started this business. And we've scaled tremendously in the last 2 years and we've had a lot of success.
I've seen tremendous success. I follow you on social media and certainly big contracts with whether that's higher education or hospitals. I mean, these places, you're not just talking about loading some junk in the back of a U-Haul. This is highly specialized, 6, 7 figure equipment that has to be moved just perfectly. And they don't give those contracts to just anybody with a truck. There's a lot of steps to that. And you've navigated that space well and you've kind of created that niche for your business. So knowing that and knowing what you've been through as an entrepreneur, I see a lot of parallels between competitive athletes who are looking for the edge and sometimes wrestling with doubts and fears and trying to prove people wrong sometimes. And in the entrepreneurship space, it's been said that within 5 years, 90% of all startups fail. And within another five, another 90% of those that succeeded the first five fail. So it is not for the faint of heart. Talk me through what surviving that doubt and that fear and whether that's naysayers from the outside or sometimes doubt from the inside. What did that teach you about yourself? And if you had it to do over again, what might you have done differently?
Well, a lot of business books tell you when you start your side hustle, keep your full-time job,
Hmm.
right? Build it on the side. Some of the most wealthiest, most successful people in the world tell you, hey, keep your full-time job and then build your business on the side. Well, I just felt I needed to be 100% all in. So I did the opposite. I quit my full-time job. I quit my high salary, six-figure executive job to start my moving business all in, right? And so
Hmm.
that was scary in itself because there goes six-figure salary, there goes the benefits, all of that is gone. And I didn't really have a solid business plan. I knew I needed to get into the commercial. I knew I had relationships. I knew I had the knowledge and the know-how, but I just really didn't have a solid business plan. I thought I was just going to be able to jump right into the commercial space with my network, and that wasn't the case. And so the reality was when we started the moving company, it was residential household goods moving. It was, hey, pick up this, excuse my language, pissy mattress, lug it down three flights of stairs, put it in your truck, pick up these trash bags full of whatever. It was humbling. It was a
Yeah.
humbling, and it was me and my business partner, Jabari Moore, graduate of Rutgers, played football at Rutgers. He was a linebacker. Him and I, we were in these trucks doing these low value, low margin residential moves, and it was humbling. It was so humbling. Losing money. We're not making money. We're losing money, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so luckily for us, it didn't last very long, but we were so committed to it.
Yeah.
We were sleeping in trucks because we couldn't afford hotels. We were sleeping at gas stations because trucks were breaking down on the road. Stuff was getting stolen from us. I mean, it was just all the horror stories. But we
Hmm.
committed. Like we committed, back-breaking work in the Texas heat, like and to be honest with you, Toby, I tried to quit every day. See, I seen this documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was like, I never told myself I was going to quit. I was like, no, I'm different. I tried to quit every day, but the difference is, I think for what people need to understand is having multiple voices in your head is a healthy thing. You're not crazy. Maybe if you're talking to yourself out loud, maybe that might be a little weird, but I encourage everyone to have multiple voices in their head. And for me, this is what works. I have a voice in my head that says, Idris, what the heck are you doing? Quit now. Go back to your corporate America job, please. Then I have another voice in my head that says, Idris, don't quit. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Right. And that's the coach told me, right? And that's the
Yeah.
coach told me. That was the mentality. Coach told me in our meetings, we used to be in situations where it was tough to give us a visual in our meetings. He used to throw his little body against the wall. And he used to say, guys, our backs are against the wall. And he'll throw his body against the wall. And he's like, we got to fight our way out. We got to fight. We got to fight. And I just remember those stories. And as I'm going through tough times, like, what would Coach Tomey do right now? What,
Hmm.
what would my dad do? My dad passed away some time ago. What would my dad do right now? What would my dad tell me? So eventually you have those voices. You have a voice that tells you to quit, and then you have a voice that tells you to keep going. Over the years, and this needs to start at a young age, you need to feed that positive voice.
Hmm.
Feed it, right? And there's certain strategies and things you can do to feed it. We don't have to get into that now, but this is what I tell people, youngsters, all the time. Feed that positive voice. And a lot of times it's wins, right? Accomplishments. Athletes, we get a lot of pats on the back, that feeds it. But when you get into a situation where you want to quit, there's going to be a voice that says quit, but there's going to be another voice that's been fed over
Yeah.
the years, that's going to outweigh that other voice. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I was like, I'm not quitting. I'm
Yeah.
not quitting. And I just kept with that. I kept with that. That voice in my head, that I'm not going to quit voice, was stronger than the other voice, and it overcame it. And one thing led to another, like compound interest. Compound interest, if you
Hmm.
invest, like compound interest, apartment move turned into a house move turned into a high value house move, a high value house move turned into an office move. And here we go, right? And next thing you know, we're moving research labs in two
Yeah.
years.
That's this growth path for sure. As you're talking, I'm kind of thinking, okay, yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's healthy to have those two voices.
Mhm.
It, sometimes it's damaging to just, if my goal was to play in the NBA, that's a fool's errand. Like no amount of work is going to get me to that level. So there's wisdom in being able to check yourself. Sometimes our dreams are just not attainable for us, maybe even in that season. But other times it's that that willingness to go the extra mile, to be the first to arrive and the last to leave, that makes all the difference. So I'm not one that blindly follows just just grind and grit and everything will work out. That's not necessarily true. And I think that can really be damaging to some people. But the flip of that is, don't give up on yourself too soon. Like, if you don't give this dream and this business a chance to build some roots and grow and compound success after success, you don't get to where you are. You quit before the fruit is born. Again, we're talking with Idris Haroon, former defender at the University of Arizona, played in the CFL, now with DWD Moving Services. Idris, I've heard it said that when words aren't enough, you sing. A question I ask of all my guests is, if we were to watch a montage of your life, what song would you pick to play in the background and why?
Oh man, that's a good one. That's a good one. Oh man. I don't know. I mean, the way I'm feeling right now, it's probably some real explicit rap music, right? I just that's where I'm at. But if you would ask me, I mean, it just kind of depends, right? It depends. I mean, like there's some times where, I want to put some Luther Vandross on, and just that's the kind of mood I'm in, or some Sade, right? Or sometimes I'm listening to some some country music, some Garth Brooks, depending on. But it just changes all the time. Like, and
Yeah,
that's in my truck. I'm in my truck, and depending on my mood, I'll switch the channel around. But right now, it's just it's any music that's motivating to me right now,
mhm.
because it's just there's a lot going on, and whatever keeps me motivated and energized, that's really what's on my playlist.
That's great. I create a playlist for all my guests. It's like a mixtape of all my guests that I put on Spotify. I had Garfield Bright from Shy on the show, if you remember them.
Yeah.
I've had some other artists, because artists, like athletes, I mean, your time to shine is fairly short and people move on to the next one pretty quickly. But what they don't realize in that is, when you got replaced on that roster, someone's dream came true, someone else's dream just ended, and it can be a very narrow window of success in the arts and in athletics. That's maybe one area where entrepreneurship definitely has a leg up, is that it's not like you get 1 or 2 years and your career's over as an entrepreneur. Hopefully you're learning and you're growing. What for Idris Haroon remains undone?
Hmm. That's a great question. There's still a lot for us to accomplish in this space. We found something special. My business partner Jabari and I found something special. We found a niche within a niche. The moving industry is saturated in Texas. It's saturated in Dallas. It's moving company. You throw a rock in any direction, hit a moving company. But what we did is we took a saturated industry and made it less competitive, and we found a niche. And that niche for us right now is we're moving research labs. And then what we're also doing, Toby, we have a new revenue stream that we're starting. We're moving college coaches, man. And so this is what I'm really excited about. This is the part of the business where I think there's a lot of potential for us, because
Mm,
here we go again. Here's another niche area. What we're finding out is there's a lot of money being thrown around in colleges. That's a whole different segment. But there's coaches that are getting hired and fired a lot quicker than in the past.
uh-huh.
And these coaches are relocating at exponential rates. And who's relocating them? Who's moving them? Well, obviously a moving company, but why not? Why can't that be us? Why can't
Yeah.
that be Dads with Daughters Moving and Logistics? DWD stands for Dads with Daughters, by the way.
Hmm. Love it.
Built a company we built a business to build a legacy for our daughters. But
That's great.
why not us, right? And so what we've done is position ourselves to get that opportunity. So in a week, on the 31st, we have our first one. We're moving an assistant coach from Texas A&M to Kansas State University, which is ironic because I had college visits to both, and then
Right.
how the world circles back around. But our first is Texas A&M to Kansas State. The following week, we go to UTEP and move an assistant coach from UTEP to a program they're building out in Texarkana. And so this is the beginning. And what I love about this opportunity is the time of the year is from January to March, where coaches are getting hired and fired. You could say, November to March, right? Because football season is kind of ending. But that's a revenue stream for moving companies. Moving is in seasons. And so
Mhm.
from January to March is typically a slow season. So if we can tap into that market, relocating coaches, not only is that a revenue stream in a slow season, but it's niche. It's very
Yeah.
niche because the schools pay for those moves. So it's the coaches' wives, really, but the coaches that select the mover and then they figure all that out. The coaches are busy recruiting and doing what they're doing. The wives have to organize, figure out the
Yeah.
move. And so what we're able to do is build those relationships with the universities, and they're hiring us to relocate their coaches. And so
Yeah.
we want to position ourselves to be the top mover in all of the conferences in the United States. We want to be the primary mover for coaching relocations
That's
for
genius.
football and basketball.
It's such a great idea. It's one of those great ideas. It's like, why hasn't anyone else done that? And so, like, if I put it out there, I almost fear that someone else is going to try to jump into that space. But man, that's a genius idea. Another thing that comes to mind is a turnkey service like this, white glove,
Mhm.
because people see that. Man, it drives me crazy. And in this world, and I think back to, how long would Coach Tomey survive in an era like this where nobody's interested in growing players? They just want the best roster they can have from year to year. And if we
Right.
sign a bunch of portal guys that are 22 years old, then we win a national championship, right? We're not recruiting 17-year-old high school kids. But what people don't realize in the hey, let's fire the coach because we didn't make a bowl game is the trickle down results of that. The entire staff gets let go. Well, they've got wives, they've got kids. There are staff members who are oftentimes let go, strength coaches, even academic folks, athletic trainers. And those people struggle with that adjustment as well. My wife's a counselor, and we've talked about this. Like, high value clients who come and go into town here in Waco oftentimes are coaches from Baylor, and those kids may struggle with a new school.
Mhm.
Those wives may struggle with they don't have friends at church, or they're not connected. And so if I know anything about people, it's that turnkey services, especially for people with means, is way easier than going out and trying to a la carte your way to this new transition. So I want to applaud you on that's such a great idea. And
Yeah.
maybe even trickle down is college athletes have money now too. NIL means you could do a niche with 20-year-old athletes as well. So I'm sure that's on your radar. But man,
Yeah.
what a great idea, and definitely needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea. We've thought about college athletes, but with moving, it's like they're not going to have much, right? I mean, yeah, coaches like the family we're moving next week. This is her sixth move. The family we're moving in UTEP. This is her 12th move, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
so, like, I think we found something special, especially if we can
100%.
build those relationships with the wives. Because, the
Yeah,
wives, they're going to share your information, they're going to brag about you, word of mouth, your business will spread there. But we're just excited about the opportunity because also we're athletes, like, we're college athlete
mhm,
guys. And
yeah,
so this is a space we need to be in. I mean, I have this vision, right? We're touching research labs and we're touching college coach relocations right now. And I just have this vision that you say University of Arizona or Baylor University where you are. I'm going over and meeting with the head of the life sciences department or the bio lab department, and we're talking about a potential lab relocation, right? And we're going over the scope of work, and we're talking about logistics and how things work. And then I shake his hand, and then I leave, and I walk across campus, and I walk into the athletic department and I walk
mhm,
into the coach's office and we start talking about relocating his staff members, right? Like that's my vision. That's where we want to be. That's very nichey, high value, high margin work. And that's the spaces we want to be in. And we're minority owned and there's no black and
boom.
brown companies doing that.
Yeah, and that credibility that you bring from your professional and collegiate pedigree is something that no one else can compete with. And so
Mhm.
for any athletes out there, I always just want to shine a light on the fact that you don't really understand the impact of just being on a roster, and that immediate credibility and that recognition that people have is it's impossible to replicate. No matter I'm working on my sixth college degree, but I've never played college sports, and there's no amount of work or want or hope that would ever allow me to be able to compete with you on that. So that's certainly something to be proud of, and to lean in on. Well, Idris, if listeners want to connect with you, if they want to check out the business, or follow you on socials, where can I point them?
Yeah, well, we're on LinkedIn. You could just look up, I'm on LinkedIn. I have a profile. I'm more of a LinkedIn guy. DWD Moving and Logistics has a LinkedIn. We also have Facebook. We're on Instagram. You can find us. We're easy to find. You can just always email me, Idris.Haroon at DWDmovingservices.com. But yeah, I'm easy to find. I'm easy to connect with. Opportunities like this, Toby, have brought more business for me. So I really appreciate this platform. I did a show I told you with one of our best leaders at Arizona history, Kelvin Efon. And as soon as I got off the show, I got a couple calls. So you never know who's listening. You never know who's listening. We're in the relationship business, right? And that's at the end of the day, athletes need to understand we're in the relationship business. And so as long as you can understand that, treat people with respect, lead with empathy, be a good human being, like all of these things that we've learned from Coach Tomey. Like as long as you can do that, then you'll be fine, right? Psychologically, the transition from sports to the real world, whether you're transitioning from sports to corporate America or just sports into the real world, it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be tough. But I think athletes need to realize being a professional athlete, that's not reality, right? Like that's not reality. You shared the percentages. Like it's not reality. Those who make it, it's a gift and a blessing from God. But the
Yeah.
majority don't. The
Yep.
majority end up having to transition and be part of the normal workforce and live your day to day, and that's fine too. You know, but for me, I think I was able to treat the real world like my NFL. And once I
Mhm.
was able to switch that mentality, like, you know what? I'm tired of saying I should have been, I should have did, I should be there. I'm going to switch my mentality and say, you know what? I'm going to treat the real world like it's my NFL. And this worked out for me.
Idris, it's been a real treat. I appreciate the chance to reconnect. One little last little bit, I always stitch this in. If you could just introduce yourself, just say your name and say, "And I am undone."
Idris Haroon, I am undone.
Awesome. I'll stop the recording right there.